And you know, I myself, other people in this community will rally around this. We've exhausted the conversation. I don't even think you need to have any more meetings. If everybody's surprised by this in March, shame on them.
It is one thing for an elected official, a moderator of all positions, to say such a thing about her constituents. It is another thing altogether when those words are put into action by silencing a member of our community, of all places, at a deliberative session, the people's meeting.
I'm running the meeting. I'm in charge. Go sit down.
We've exhausted the conversation, and we don't need to have any more meetings.
Assistant moderator, could you please escort Greg Fritz out of the room?
Shame on them, and it will be done publicly for all to see.
The committee unanimously all favored the built-to-suit option.
And when a sitting board member apparently attempts to put words in a man's mouth
Towards the end of the meeting, about 2 hours in, around an hour 58,
and has a precise meeting date and timestamp at her fingertips that leads the voter to this.
So you're
When you said neither
Option
both did.
yeah.
I'm option 2.
But that man's true position in its full context is this.
And given the choice between the two, if you pretend those are only two choices, I think that the new bill makes the most sense. But I still think we should understand the Band-Aid costs. I think if that's what the community supported over 40 years, that might be the way to improve education and the building, and might not be what everyone wants, but that might be the better option. We should know what that is.
Given the choice between those two options, if you pretend those are the only two options, then option 2. But there might very well be better options available. And Mrs. Gascoigne acknowledges the lack of full support by stating,
I just want to
It had to choose
understand
those
what you're
two.
not saying. So between these two options, you like option 2,
Yes.
but I don't feel like that has your full throttle support.
Then you find that board member Gascoigne's claim that the committee unanimously favored option 2 was at best a mischaracterization of this man's true position, should never have been said, and especially in light of what has followed since then, that this seems to have been an intentional character assassination of not just a fellow citizen, but a candidate for the Amherst School Board seat, Mr. Greg Fritz, who last election garnered the official support of over 1,000 voters and did not win the seat on very thin margins. In my view, it was not just Greg Fritz that was silenced that night, but over 1,000 other Amherst residents. And if you really think about what happened here, it doesn't just silence those people, but has the potential to silence all of us. If an elected moderator is allowed to silence people in a way that I've never seen before, with no call to question, with no vote of continuing or ending the debate, then this could happen to you, me, or anyone else. This should concern all of us. When I see a multi-year volunteer like Mr. Fritz consistently over time state the importance of remaining truthful with the public, I see why he wanted to respond to board member Gascoigne's inaccurate claims about him.
Chris here. I think what you said, I think is what we want to have backed up in evidence. That's a strong statement if we can prove it's true. And I think that's going to help a lot of the no voters go to yes.
And here,
So we stick to the truth, and I think that buys us a lot of credibility. I think that's one reason why I've been very hesitant to endorse things when I hear statements that are provably untrue and that nobody wants to be honest about it.
to add insult to injury, moderator Grudzian saw fit to continue this smearing of Mr. Fritz online after the deliberative with posts to social media like this, a post to the Amherst Moms group, a group that she knows Mr. Fritz cannot see, which parrots the timestamp that Mrs. Gascoigne put out there and once again mischaracterizes his position. And this comment here, where Mrs. Grudzian correctly states that it's on video, which as you will see possibly puts her in a very difficult position. She says she called the last speaker and that the crowd agreed.
I'm going to say that if anybody has anything different to share, I'm going to allow 2 more speakers. If anybody has a different point to make, I'd like to let them go first.
In full transparency, the timestamp is shown on the lower left corner. You can go to the deliberative video and see if any audience agreement or vote was made. If I'm missing anything, please let me know. If not, then Mrs. Grudzian has misinformed the public. Please keep one very important thing in mind. A moderator takes an oath of office that states, "I will impartially perform my duty." Impartially means in a way that treats all rivals equally. The very narrow role of a moderator is to regulate the business of town meetings, which means establishing and abiding by rules. If, for example, a moderator were to allow a citizen on the same side of an issue from her to speak for almost a full minute longer than the rules state, yet short those on the opposite side of an issue from her, that would neither be abiding by her own rules or fulfilling her oath of office. I believe both of those happened here, as at least 2 citizens opposite Mrs. Grudzian were attempted or successfully prevented from using their full 3 minutes, but at least one on the same side of the issue was granted substantially more time. I will not draw attention to that citizen, as they were respectful, and I will not highlight them in this video. This is Mr. Fritz approaching the mic. Please pay attention to the time in the lower left corner.
Okay, one last speaker.
Man, hoping to pull a Belichick and get the end of the first half and score at the beginning of the second half. My name is Greg Fritz, and the support tonight.
This is when he finishes statement. Again, look at the lower left corner.
I look forward to working with you some more, and we'll get this right next year. Thanks so much.
So just to clarify, at our
Mr. Fritz had about 45 seconds of time left remaining of his 3 minutes to speak. Immediately after speaking, Mrs. Gascoigne put those inaccurate words in Mr. Fritz's mouth, to which he had every right, and more importantly, the time to respond. Here is Mr. Fritz's portion of his comments, speaking as a Building and Grounds Committee member himself that attempted to correct the record. The Amherst School Board previously claimed that his committee unanimously supported this warrant article. However, since there was no vote, this should never have been said. The fact that Mrs. Gascoigne acknowledged this and Mr. Fritz's true position at the Building and Grounds meeting makes this all the more egregious.
I'm proud to have served on the Building and Grounds group this year that helped support serve the residents of town by helping on this project. But to correct the record of the presentation earlier, Building and Grounds did not support this as a committee. I know a comment, I can't talk back after you're done, so I'm trying to say everything I need to say one speech here, that there was no vote. There was no vote. There was no record that we had of support as a committee. It was not recommended out of the committee. I know this is false. I don't know everything else you're talking about, but I know that's false. I wonder what else is false. And that's really hurting a lot of the trust.
Mrs. Gascoigne admitted that Mr. Fritz was correct about there being no official stance from the Building and Grounds Committee, as there was no motion to do so.
the committee unanimously all favored the build-to-suit option. Mr. Fritz is correct. We did not, as an advisory committee to the Amherst School Board, we did not take an official motion or make an official vote, which is why this slide did not say that.
Which is also why she and the Amherst board should never have said that either. What followed was this awful display in which the Amherst School Board and town moderator apparently worked in tandem to first attempt to discredit and then promptly muzzle a school board candidate that is running against their selected and installed candidate, Mr. Tim Taberge. I believe the reason for this is clear, that Mr. Taberge's indefensible statements made about his neighbors make him a tough sell to voters, and that this is their way of helping him get elected. More division, more misinformation. It is a pattern.
For that option in that meeting.
Keep in mind that this microphone filters out background noise. Although you do not hear Mr. Fritz asking to respond to that, you hear Mrs. Grudzian say no. She ignores the snickering from some that follows.
No. Okay, we're going to move on, which I'm sure everybody's happy about.
A clear dig at Mr. Fritz.
Moderator, I think you mentioned that one could speak
Greg,
twice.
I said one more time, please go sit down.
Moderator, you said we could speak
Please
twice.
sit down. I'm
If
going to
everyone
ask
had
you
already
2
spoken.
times to sit down. If you don't sit down, I will have somebody escort you out of the room.
I
Greg,
believe you said we could
please
speak
sit down.
twice
That's 3
after-
times.
That was your rule, moderator rules we agreed to at the beginning of the meeting.
Sit down, please. I'm running the meeting. I'm in charge. Go sit down.
Your own rule said we have a chance to speak twice after everyone's already spoken.
Please sit down.
While Mr. Fritz then respectfully stands and waits to be recognized, jeers and shouting from several in the audience break out. The moderator neglects her duties and allows this behavior unchecked.
We're not going to do this all night.
The moderator does not have all night, or at least a 45 seconds minimum due to Mr. Fritz, while a multi-million-dollar spending measure is on the table that will affect residents for 25 years to come if passed.
So please sit down or I'm going to have you escorted out of the room. I have an assistant moderator here who can escort you out of the room if you do not sit down. Assistant moderator, could you please escort Greg Fritz out of the room? Thank you, and I'm sorry. Each speaker shall state name and limit their time at the microphone to 3 minutes.
I do not believe that Mrs. Grudzian was sorry at all, because if she were, she would have followed her own rules read at the beginning of the meeting.
No individual will be allowed to speak a second time until all others wishing to speak for the first time have done so.
3 minutes per speaker, as well as additional time when everyone else is done speaking.
Speakers wishing to address the meeting should form a line at the 2 microphones.
Speakers must stand at one of 2 microphones, not shout from the audience, which happened multiple times at this session. Mrs. Grudzian failed to enforce this and maintain order in the proceedings. I know that there are many in this community that are respectful of each other, but at these meetings, in too many cases, that has not been the case with some individuals.
No motion to call the question shall be accepted by the moderator until there has been sufficient debate on the article.
There's that call to question I was referring to, that the moderator cannot even accept from the audience, which was not even done here, until there has been sufficient debate. Rather than follow this very important rule, she limited debate arbitrarily with no input from the audience and before people were done speaking, apparently because she wasn't going to do this all night. Now, if it is somehow above board for a moderator to do that, I've simply never seen another moderator do that ever, and I think there's good reason for that. The idea held by moderator Grudzian that if ever citizens vote no on a warrant based simply on their inability to pay, that they should downsize or move. You can't expect something for nothing. If you stay, you pay. Although she says I in that statement, I don't believe that's what she means, as if she did, I think she would have already moved. As here, posted after that first statement, Mrs. Grudzian makes public complaint about being charged impact fees for expanding onto a business with yurts, which are a form of portable classroom that she claims have no place at Wilkins due to a myriad of issues. Now, I don't know the validity of her concerns on these particular impact fees, but I do know that when given opportunity to pay towards warrant articles that others can't afford, she raises public complaint. Impact fees, you should know, go directly to new infrastructure, such as, for example, schools. But she claims she's already paying. But if you stay, you pay. So for those of you already paying, through our not so unsubstantial taxes, that Mrs. Grudzian is of the mind that you should get out or downsize if you can't afford it. Furthermore, in this post, Mrs. Grudzian complains about secret ballots which are written right into our RSAs that fall under the direct purview of a moderator. She calls them sneaky, sly, secret ballots. She rallies people to fight against the sneak. Secret ballots serve a purpose, though. For example, if citizens were concerned about being targeted, shouted down, or publicly humiliated, then secret ballots have a place in preventing that. And in this final post, she questioned the option of impeaching a then board member that she questioned the motives of. One of the only ways to remove an elected official that I'm aware of is through a proven violation or violations of their oath of office. So, if you agree with all of this and choose to look away when a citizen is severely mistreated by a moderator of all people, then please stop and think what will happen to you if a moderator disagrees with you, sets their sights on you. Please think about what a school board putting words in your mouth and mischaracterizing your position would feel like in front of the whole town. I'll leave you now with some words from our 2 school board candidates. From social media, some words from candidate Tim Taberge. And from Greg Fritz, when previously asked in a Patch article about the best advice ever shared with him was, he answered, "Life is full of trade-offs."